Here at Hamilton Native Outpost, I often get the question of what native warm season grass should I plant for forage? So somebody is interested in native warm season grasses, they've heard how productive they can be, what good quality forage they can be during the summer, but which one do I plant? Big bluestem, little bluestem, what's the best grass for me? And I would say it depends a lot on a lot of different factors. But there are 4 different grasses, you could call them the 4 horsemen of the prairie, the 4 major forage producing grasses in the warm season grass category. And those would be big bluestem, Indiangrass, eastern Gama Grass, and Switchgrass. Now, little bluestem also makes an appearance sometimes, as does a whole host of other plants. It just kind of depends on your goals and whatnot. But let's look at some different combinations and some different reasons to combine and not combine, and different establishment techniques, and just think about what it is that we might want to plant. A very popular choice is a big bluestem and an Indiangrass mix, also mixed with little bluestem. That's a very popular choice as well. Now, the little bluestem is usually in it a much more minor component. Little bluestem is not the forage grass that the big bluestem and Indiangrass are. The other 2 are much bigger, much growthier. Big bluestem, Indiangrass, little bluestem, with or without that little bluestem component, makes a really great choice, especially in a situation where you want to use the panoramic herbicide. Panoramic, or plateau is another name for it, a mazipic, is an herbicide that eliminates a lot of the annual weed competition. So you always have weeds coming in from the seed bank, the foxtails, the ragweeds, the crabgrasses, they're there in almost every situation. So we can eliminate that competition with this herbicide, and it really speeds up the establishment of our native warm season grasses. But not all native warm season grasses can tolerate that panoramic herbicide. But the big bluestem, the Indiangrass, and the little bluestem, they can all tolerate it, as well as the side oats. And side oats can be put in a really dry site in a really minor component. It's not as big and growthy, but it's really adapted to a dry site. Another reason to do a big bluestem, Indiangrass, and maybe little bluestem mix would be that for a dry site, for the drier end of things, those plants are really adapted, really well adapted to that sort of situation. So the big bluestem, the Indiangrass, maybe a little bluestem in there as well, is a great option for the reasons of a later maturity of the grass. So it wants to come off a little bit later, which is often good in a cool season based forage operation. It's great from the standpoint you can use panoramic herbicide on it. So there's a lot of good points, and it really loves a dry site. It doesn't mind a dry site anyway. Is super productive in a dry site, I should say, as well. And there's no problem necessarily, except you don't get the benefits of the diversity that come with diversity of doing a straight big bluestem field or a straight Indiangrass field. Now, I would avoid a straight little bluestem field from the forage production standpoint. It's just not as productive. It's not one of the big major warm season grasses for forage, I would say. So big bluestem, Indiangrass can, and of course you can, in monoculture alone, you can also use that panoramic herbicide with either of them. So it makes a great choice. Okay, so what are our other choices? Let's talk a little bit about switchgrass and eastern Gama Grass. Switchgrass and eastern Gama Grass are super productive forages, especially, like Gama Grass on a wet soil, super great option. They're a little bit earlier in the season, and that may be a real benefit to you. You might want that earlier, and we're just talking like maybe a couple weeks earlier. But a lot of times it's not a benefit. And the reason why it might not be a benefit would be that you're trying to come in and you're trying to graze all of your fescue fields, and then you want to move on to your warm season grass fields. And if you are a little bit earlier, you're needing to both be on your fescue fields and your warm season grass fields, and you're like, I can't be everywhere. And so then you lose production from one of those or the other. It's not necessarily a downside or an upside that those two produce forage a little bit sooner. It's just something to consider. It may be a real benefit to you, and it may be a real detriment to you. So just consider that in your operation. Now, these 2 grasses, you cannot use the panoramic herbicide with them. They're not tolerant of that herbicide. Basically, it will kill or damage a lot of those seedlings. You can use atrazine in the establishment of both of them. So if that's an option, it is a restricted use herbicide. But you can end up with some really nice stands, again, with that quicker time frame because you don't have that annual weed pressure as much when you use an herbicide like atrazine in the establishment of it. With the eastern Gama Grass and the switchgrass, I like to do a monoculture of them as opposed to a multi-species planting or really focus heavy on one. And the reason for that is this. If you mix your eastern Gama Grass, say with Big Bluestem and Indiangrass, let's say, so we've got this three-way mix, and let's just do a third of each one. Eastern Gama Grass, Big Bluestem, Indiangrass. Well, these two are going to mature later. And so do you come and graze the Gama Grass when you should, like a couple weeks earlier? But it's only a third of your stand. Or do you let that one go and come in and graze these two? You end up with these questions about timing, like when do I come for the early, do I come for the late, and the percent of stand plays in there. Now, if you just want a little bit of diversity, if you want to do a straight eastern Gama Grass field and throw in 5% Big Bluestem and 5% Indiangrass or something like that, there's no real problems with that in my mind if that diversity is serving some purpose in your mind. But really, I like to go straight. If I'm going to go eastern Gama Grass, just go straight. Or switchgrass, go straight. As opposed to that three-way mix of Big Bluestem, Indiangrass, Little Bluestem that I really like with those species. Now, I will say if you want to go diverse and use eastern Gama Grass or switchgrass, go diverse. Like go 50 species, go 40 species, and have that warm season, that cool season, those forbs and legumes all mixed together out there. Because what that will do is there's no perfect day to be there then, because everything, has its season and its day, and something's mature, something's too young, and something's just right. So any day you come, you've got all of those classes, and you don't have to worry about it nearly as much because it's not a significant amount of your stand. And that is another option when we talk about pastures and natives, is to just plant a diversity. We call it a diverse native grassland. And basically it's looking to recreate that grassland like the bison would have seen. So you've got the native warm season grasses, the native cool season grasses, the native forbs and legumes, all mixed together just like the bison would have seen. Instead of having cool seasons here, warm seasons in that field, having this, where they don't touch and aren't mixed together. Our experience is when you go diverse, the native plants have a history of working together, and our experiences are that they've worked a lot better than mixing the natives and the non-natives. I'm not going to say it can't work, but our experience is when you go diversity of native plants, it's better to just stick to the natives, is our rule of thumb. Another factor we may want to consider as we're choosing between eastern Gama Grass, switchgrass, Big Blue, Indian, another factor to consider is cost. The cost of these vary by the year. Maybe there was a really bad production year for eastern Gama Grass and the price is high, or maybe it's switchgrass next year or whatever. So the prices vary year to year, but there's certain years when the cost of one can be quite a bit more. Right now, eastern Gama Grass is quite a bit more expensive, like at least double the price of, say, a Big Bluestem option, or maybe triple. So there's just lots of different factors to consider in, but know that I think in general, the principles to walk away from this with are to have a plan as far as like how it's going to fit into your forage chain. How does it fit in? Are you moving from cool season to warm season, or do you need that earlier production of a warm season grass? What is that goal there? Think about weed control during establishment, and which is a good reason not to mix eastern Gama Grass or switchgrass with Big Blue or Indian, just so that you can get different herbicide. There's different herbicides that work with different things. So think about that herbicide regimen that you're going to use, should you choose to use the herbicides, of course, during that establishment time frame. Think about how it fits into your grazing operation, where your cattle are located, during that season of the year, so that you have a smooth rotation through the different forages that are coming off. And of course, with anything, it's always important to get the right plant in the right place. So make sure the species that you're planting is adapted to the soils you're planting it in. So switchgrass, eastern Gama Grass, Big Bluestem, Indiangrass, the four horsemen of the native grassland, they're really important, great native forages, produce a bunch of quality forage, both quality and quantity, in a time when we don't, in a cool season-based pasture system, when we don't have a bunch of forage and we don't have that quality and we're not making use of that sunlight, that bright sun of summer. We can grow a lot of plant material then. So they're great forages. It's just a matter of which one do you plant, how much of each one, and do you plant a monoculture or a mix. So you can't go too wrong when you're planting Big Bluestem, Indiangrass, eastern Gama Grass, and Switchgrass. There's just factors to consider, factors to weigh out in your mind, and if you want to chat with somebody about which option might be good for you, if you've got other factors you want to throw into the mix, give us a call or shoot us an email and we'd be happy to set our technical staff up to talk with you about that. There's also a lot of resources on our website and information about specific plants on our website. So if you want to learn more about one of these plants that we've talked about, check out our website for that. If you want to learn more about how to establish Big Bluestem, how's that different than establishing eastern Gama Grass, for instance? What is the timeline that gets me to use that panoramic herbicide? What are the steps involved in that? So if you want a timeline, an establishment timeline we call them, to get from point A, which is a fescue pasture or whatever it is, to point B, which is an eastern Gama Grass pasture or whatever it is, using one of those timelines can really lay the steps out in front of you. It's not really complicated, it's just that it's a process. And so being able to see those steps in front of you can be really helpful. I'm Elizabeth at Hamilton Native Outpost, and what we do is raise native grass and wildflower seed. A big goal of ours, and it's a passion too, is to help people be successful with a planting. Help them get the right mix, because your forage mix is so important to the success of what you're doing. If you have questions or want to chat, give us a holler.